Hey, so I have some. I'm thinking about talking to some people about the whole remote work from home thing and how it applies, or in many cases doesn't apply. And people are kind of forgetting this, that this is the case, and what an employee is and is supposed to be, and the idea that an employee should show up to work and do nothing but work for 8 hours, and any time that is spent between tasks should be spent hounding your boss or some other superior for what job needs to happen at whatever time, or what else can be worked on. And that's, it's kind of an idealized version of an employee, I guess, and also it's a certain type of employee. Consider someone who works at a help desk, someone who's answering phones in any capacity, actually. So for as long as the employment hours are taking place, that person is expected to be at the phone, available, and capable of answering and accepting calls. If there are no calls, there are probably some subtasks or things like that someone might work on, but there's generally not an entire job. This depends on how your boss allocates your time, but there's generally not an entire 40-hour-a-week job that you're supposed to be doing in addition to answering the phone. And frankly, in many cases, the job associated with someone who is answering the phone is not necessarily a high-skilled job, especially if you're just like frontline. So frontline people they're just taking the call, they're performing the set of tasks, and then when they're done, they hand the call off, or whatever the call ends, they hang up, and then they wait. There might be a little bit of management, a little bit of back-end stuff that takes place, but the idea that people taking these first-line phone calls, which are have traditionally been people who are remote anyways, have downtime, that's just a thing. The phone does not always ring. I've actually worked on help desks that needed to be open during holiday times. So things like the week before Christmas, or the last couple weeks of the year, those weeks are traditionally, especially for larger companies, they're definitely times when the budget's already been locked in, so there's not anything happening, no changes, no system updates, no change management, unless there's an emergency of some kind. So I was basically just paid to sit there and do nothing. Browse the internet, listen to an audiobook, and that's it. And that was fine. If there were other tasks for my boss that my boss could have said to me, I probably would have been a lot happier. I think she was out too. But it just was what it was. And at no point was I capable of saying, well, I'm just going to leave. This isn't important. Because if that call comes in, you need to be there. You are being paid to be present. Even if you are not working, you are being paid to be present. You are paid to to exist if the need should arise. And this is where some managers get into this time management breakdown thing, where it's like, well, and I've experienced this. It's like, well, there's you have a 30% downtime. You could be absorbing other work here. You could be doing this, that, the other. Like, okay, cool. But are you actively managing me to know when I don't have that downtime? And when I don't have that downtime, is that task getting assigned to someone else? There's especially taking calls from customers. There are instances where you are just swamped. You get in, there's voicemails you're answering, there's calls you're taking, and then it's just call after call after call. That's just the nature of the beast. That's the way it works sometimes. It's spikes in work. It's not a steady increase. These are things that are different from day to day. And then applying maths and applying data visualizations to it does not say, here we go, here's why we should be able to cut these employees. That's the other thing, is that this level of this application of this is when you have those downtimes. It's like you have a 10 person group answering the calls, or 10 people working on tickets, or 10 people working on whatever, and your workload goes up, and you have 10 people working on it. It's just barely enough, and you go, okay, we're fine, and then you make it over the hump, and then it goes down to nothing, and then everyone's bored, or there's not enough people, or there's not enough work. You go, oh well, let's just fire half the people. So you fire 5 people, and then the work volume goes up, and now it can't be handled. You're not meeting your customer requirements because you're not answering the phone because you just don't have enough people. This is the kinds of things that you're actually supposed to learn in business management, to recognize that well, if I cut to the bone wherever I can, then things will be better, profits will be higher. There won't be a business in a couple of years, but the profits will be really high during that time, I'm sure. At least at first. So there's a different variety. There's different requirements there for different employees. They do different things. I talk about help desk and phone support as an example because I have a lot of experience in it. Now, put that into the realm of a programmer who has nothing but an endless list of pull requests, basically, that at some point the boss comes in and goes, hey, reprioritize this higher, hey, reprioritize this lower, excuse me, or hey, focus on this section or this category, or a sprint where you're working extra hard, extra hours, whatever. Your job is basically doing the exact same thing, and depending on how much contact you have with other people, you might need to have work hours that are the same as other people, or to have easy contact with other people, because if you have, and this is another thing, the globalized economy, you're communicating with developers or other people or QA testers that are on the other side of the world. Well, guess what? Every contact you have, every touch point you have, every update you have has a 24-hour turnaround time, essentially. You show up in the morning, you submit a request, and you do nothing with it until the middle of the night, when the person gets on and then responds to it, and then 24 hours later you come back into work the next day and you have an answer. And if you haven't, that's the kind of thing that can drag on forever. Have you done this? Yes. Okay, well, thanks. Like, you need to pack as much information as you can into those requests. If this is the issue, then can we try this? If that's not the issue, then would it be something like this? And if not that, can we punt and try something different? And get as many answers as you possibly can, because those 3 questions is 72 hours of response time. But those are jobs that can be, set at different times, put at different work intervals, and certainly something that can be done completely remotely. If you get higher into other positions, you have where you have more of a lateral view of the company, then you have this opportunity to chime in on different aspects of things that are being worked on, and your input is actually valuable. To be someone who just shows up and actually, and this is, I'm not going to like saying this, but it does need to be said, someone who shows up to the meeting and listens the entire time and says nothing except at the end goes, oh, no, wait, that won't work. We have to do this first. Don't forget. Okay, great. Yeah, we'll do that. We'll add that to the list, the action items, whatever. Or someone who halfway through the meeting goes, wait, we can't do this because of this other problem that we know about. Well, you're the only one that knows about it, or you're the only one that has the view into the different verticals of the company to be able to say, this is a problem, this is going to be a problem. We're either not going to be able to do it, or we're going to have to plan around it. And your job is to essentially sit in a meeting and be bored while you listen, and then point out little niggling bits that are wrong, or point out, efficiencies too. That's also there. If you have that lateral view, you can say, hey, we do something like this in another group. What if we adapt that process? What if we just tweak it a little bit and kind of copy that? Or maybe this other group would be better suited for actually performing that task. And that's, again, someone who is essentially, I don't want to say working or not working, because this is all stuff that you can compare to a carpenter who has a defined set of tasks, someone who does a physical task and says, I'm going to sit down and create this table, and every time, all the time I spend not creating this table, and I guess we have to assume in this instance that this is someone who has an existing plan laid out for the table. Now, I need to build a table. I know what my beginning product is, or my beginning parts are. I know what my end product is, and I know the process for getting from point A to point B. And literally anything that this carpenter does that is not building a table is not productive. So anyone interrupting that carpenter who is building the table is decreasing his productivity. Now, if you're creating 10,000 tables, and the carpenter has to come into the meeting and go, why am I here? And listen through a 4-hour meeting of the discussions of how this process of building these 10,000 tables is going to take place. And then at the right at the end of it, he goes, wait a minute. If you fit it like that, it's not going to work. You have to do this part first, and that'll make the end a lot easier to fit together. So that'll help with the process. Well, great. You just shaved, 10%, 20% off of the production time for each of these tables times 10,000. That's extremely efficient. And yet the carpenter shows up to work and basically hates his life because he's sitting in a meeting for 4 hours only to say one thing. It's a expertise that you're paying for. You're paying to have that person available on call immediately to be able to say, no, that's dumb, and here's why. No, you shouldn't do that, or yes, you should do that, and here's why. And that's something that is not really recognized. This is the kind of position that a manager would look at and go, no, this guy doesn't do anything. This guy's in meetings all day. This guy doesn't contribute enough. And technically, you can make that argument, I guess, but if you have a high enough level view, which most middle managers do not, you don't understand that this person is actually, glue that is holding a lot of things together, that is improving a lot of things. It's people who come up with productivity, me talking about workflow guys, right? People who come up with little efficiencies and little productivities, especially in larger companies, that pay their salary for a year. And then 6 months later, it's like, well, what have you done lately? It's very short-sighted, and corporate America being short-sighted, big surprise, right? Q1. What about next year's Q1? What about next year's Q4? So it's something that has bothered me and has confused me, frankly, for a long time, as far as what a worker is, what an employee is, and being a programmer myself, I feel less useful when I'm not making something physical, when I'm just flipping bits around. I know it is of value, but it doesn't always feel of value. And I've certainly had conversations with middle managers before. well, what have you contributed? What are you working on? What is this team doing? How is the team better with you on it? And there has literally been those like, what have you done for me lately questions. It's like, do you have no understanding? And the answer is probably yes.